Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm going to be speaking with Danielle, also known as Journey of a Braid on Instagram. Danielle, thanks so much for joining us today. And it's really nice to meet you as well.
I am so excited for this conversation. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Of course. So everyone, we're going to be speaking about fashion as activism, but more so and more importantly, going to be speaking about expressing your intentions through fashion and the platform that Danielle's built for her to do so. So if you have any questions at all or any comments for Danielle, please drop them in the chat. And then we're going to spend the last 10 minutes or so answering them. So before we get started, I'll give a quick introduction on myself, and then we'll get into our conversation. So my name is Catherine. I'm hosting on behalf of Yellowbrick today. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I work in marketing at Adidas Canada. I also do some freelance consulting on the side for brands and nonprofits focused on brand strategy, youth culture, and community. And I also have a vintage shop called Human Goods. And lastly, I'm a Yellowbrick alumni. Yes. I'm also a Yellowbrick alumni. I graduated from the Sneaker Essentials program a few years back and have been working very closely with the Yellowbrick fam ever since. So now that I've introduced myself, Danielle, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself and a little bit about your background.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. And what a beautiful profile you have.
Thank you.
For me, I have, the only real constant throughout my life has been creativity. I initially, I always wanted to go deeper into emotions. I've always found that emotions are something very special and that they guide so much of who we are. But it was really hard to focus on that when I was little because my mother was an artist and there was like a very negative connotation towards that in my family because my mother left when I was about 6 years old. And so I had to keep that part of myself in. And the only way to let it out was through marketing. So because that was like it's like the technological and the business oriented way of talking about creativity. So I studied business, I majored in marketing. I worked in advertising agencies in Mexico, in Toronto. Then I moved to Sweden. When I was in Sweden, I kept going to the marketing path. And when I moved to Miami, I got a really good opportunity to work in fashion. And one of the things that I've done is I've always written a lot. I love writing. For me, that's one of the ways in which you can truly understand and connect with yourself. Mm-hmm. And art has a way to find you. I don't think that anyone chooses to be an artist. I think that life sort of corners you to a place and then that artistry comes out. And the initial window into this creative process for me was fashion. I was working for Condé Nast, writing mostly for Glamour magazine for about 3 years. And I understood how my looks and many of the things I did were connecting with people. And that became a very special way of connecting with them. I was braiding my hair, but more of like in a cathartical way because my nanny used to braid me when I was little. My mother wasn't there. So there was a big connection. And I'm from Mexico City, where braiding is everywhere and where it has very special, magical and ritualistic connotations. And so now I'm moving more into performance art. I've been doing this for the past 3 years. And I've found that braiding is the structure, one of my life and two of my practice. So it has become a way to connect with my deepest self and to talk about major themes that really interest me, which mostly revolve around belonging and how we must braid ourselves together to move forward.
I love that. And I appreciate you sharing such a transparent background on yourself and excited to learn more about you. You mentioned your focus on sharing your positive messages and your cultural beliefs. What are some actionable steps that listeners can take tomorrow to start making a positive change in their community?
I think, and it's like every morning when you get dressed, you are making a statement, regardless of wearing a t-shirt and jeans, whatever you're wearing, you're making a statement. So I think that it's very important. That's the easiest way to start focusing on what kind of statement do you want to do. Like creativity is everywhere. We're creative beings. When you see a child, like there are no limits. We sort of get stripped of it as we grow older. So just try to make creativity a daily practice. For me, it's all about letting go from the hair. So another easy step towards starting to connect with this is that when you start your day in the morning, you look at yourself straight in the eyes in the mirror. You cannot lie to yourself. You can lie to your psychologist. You can lie to your yoga teacher, but never to yourself. And as you have this connection, you're able to sort of like, let go of everything that's stopping you, all the obstacles that you know that are around you. And then call upon your ancestry, call upon the deepest purpose inside of you whenever you're braiding yourself or whenever you're combing your hair, or however you want to do it. But just make it about something that is related to the hair. It doesn't matter if it's long, if you're bald, but like this area of your head is very special.
Could you tell us a bit more about what makes it so special?
Well, the thing is that, you know, in our pre-Hispanic cultures, when it comes to the Aztecs and when it comes to the Mayans, which are two of the cultures that I am the most intrigued with and that I study the closest, the hair was only an extension of the soul. So actually the soul was manifested in three areas. One was here, the other one was a heart, and the third one was a gut. It was divided between the three. In time, we've learned that actually the brain, the heart, and the gut, they all have neurons. Like, it's not only the brain that is creating ideas and that is giving you feelings. That's why when you're terrified, you feel it in your gut. And when your heart is broken, you feel it in the heart. You know, it's real. And so I've been focusing on this space because that's where our connection with God is. And after doing God, however you define it, I'm not talking about any particular God, obviously. And I discovered that by braiding my hair every day, I started doing this. It's a long story, and I know we don't have that much time. But when I started doing it, I realized that just having something that was protecting this area of my head was giving me a strength that I didn't even know I had. You know, I grew up with all these messages of calladita te ves más bonita. When you're shutting up, you look prettier. She must be in her days. You know, like all these negative things that regardless of culture, we've all been through. And when I braided myself, I could see myself and I looked different. And by looking different, I was able to be different instead of being who they had told me I was. So braiding for me is also like this button that carries a daily intention and that sort of magnifies bringing about this ripple effect.
It's super important. So thank you. And I really appreciate the focus on intention and starting with yourself. So that seems very important to you. And it definitely comes across across your different social platforms. So when thinking about social, you built a really strong audience. So what are some pieces of advice that you would give to creatives who are looking to get started on a social platform?
I think the most important is, you know, I started my social platform because Condé Nast actually told me that I had to have a platform. Until then, I used to be the voice of Volkswagen in Canada and of different brands, more from a marketing perspective. But I had never tried to do it for myself because I was very private, believe it or not. But when you do so, like, just bring about who you are in an entirety, you know, like, be bold, be yourself. We don't want to see more videos of people changing their clothes in a second. Like, just go deeper into your purpose. We have evolved so much, and I find that technology has become all about watching like meaningless things. We have all the information in the world accessible through our fingertips, and we're creating a society that lives out of FOMO and comparison between someone looking better than you do and filters. And please do not fall into that. Go deeper, because you are a source of light. There is so much more inside of you that can be out there. So go for that. Don't just try to replicate what others are doing.
Amazing. Your passion comes across so pure and so clearly, and I'm really looking forward to like diving into more of your content after this. But one thing you mentioned is that used to be a little bit more private, and then now you're putting your voice out there a bit more. How do you find that? How do you strike a balance between what you share in private and what you share in public? That balance between private and public.
Yes, that's a very interesting question. I think it all comes about. There's no planning, and I think that that's what my audience can appreciate from my account. I never schedule posts. I never, you know, it's always in the vibe of where I'm at, because again, we're so braided together, we humans, that whatever, like your experience right now of life in some way is mirroring mine. And if I speak to you from the moment where I'm at, it's probably going to resonate with you, because we're mirrors of each other. Regardless, we try to divide ourselves so much, but it's the human experience. So I just speak from where I am at the moment. And sometimes I go really vulnerable and I'm like, oh my God, no, I should delete that. And you know, I obviously get these moments of insecurity, because sometimes I go really deep into the things I'm feeling. But I know that it's the greater purpose. You know, my intention is always about helping someone else out. So I make that clear in the way I live and the way I share.
I love that. And want to remind everyone who's listening, if you have any questions or any comments for Danielle, please drop them in the chat. And then in just a few minutes, we'll get to answering them. So just going to take a quick look for questions. First one we can speak to is, what does the role of color play in your braids, Danielle? So how do you use color to create your focus for the day to live intentionally?
You know what? It's a very important question, because actually the first canvas that I created, and these canvases, they're inspired by the Tehuana tradition in Mexico, from the Istmo de Tehuantepec. It's from this indigenous group called the Itzmeñas. And they do it with ribbons. And I sometimes do my braids with ribbons, but this one in particular, the one I'm like, this is what they look like. They're huge pieces of textile. And this one is passion. This was my first one. This is my first design that I love with all my heart. And it's all about the passion and the force within, because red, you know, like, look at me, like I need red in my life. I used to live in Sweden, where everyone would dress black and gray. And I started doing the same thing, because we sort of mimetize each other. And I saw that was one of the darkest stages of my life. So I think that when you intentionally bring color about, your life already like shines brighter. Everything shines brighter around you. Then there's the gold one. The gold canvas is all about the spiritual side of things. And then there's the dark canvas, the black one, which is all about the darkness that surrounds us. So I try to bring about all these things in my practice and in my daily life.
Okay, really appreciate that. Truly so much meaning in color. So appreciate that answer. Next question from an anonymous attendee. How do we balance that spiritual mindset in today's materialistic world?
The thing is that every area of your life, I think that the biggest struggle and the biggest thing that we need to pay attention to is the word that you used, balance. You know, what I like particularly about this braid is that it's putting together the right and the left side of the hair. It's braiding it into one, because even though you can go fully creative, you need to stay rational. Even though you can go really spiritual, you also need to stay in this world. Like, you cannot live without a house, you cannot live without clothes, you cannot live. But if you find this moment where you spend the time, and I do that through meditation, that's what helps for like the most for me. Whenever you start going too far on this side, you need to make sure that you center yourself. You cannot be fully one or fully the other. You need to keep it in control. And it's going to be like in this middle point in everything in your life, that you're going to find the space where you have to be. Like, just don't let yourself be pulled on the wrong direction for too long.
Right. Appreciate the notes about finding that balance. And to that point, Yamilet asked the question, how do you balance being a mama, a wife, a creative, and a person with your own needs?
It's incredibly hard. Like, that's what keeps me up at night the most. One of the things that truly helps me is the power of intention. One, because I have it here, and when I go to bed at night, I need to make sure that I live my life for someone that went beyond my nucleic family, you know, that I did something that day to help someone else out. And believe it or not, that brings equilibrium to the rest of your life. There are days when I am a wonderful mother. There are days when I really develop creatively. There are days when I'm wonderful as a wife. It's rarely on the same day. And I also try not to be that hard on myself, because we are all trying to make a lot. But when you act from a good place, and when you speak out loud also your feelings, I'm very honest with my kids. Sometimes I'm like, my love, sorry, today I really need to work, because I'm dying to get this thing out that I have in my throat, and I need to let it out. Please give me 20 minutes. So honesty is the only way to move forward. Ask for help a lot. My husband helps me a ton to find this balance, because without him, I can't. So you always create this circle of people around you, because we are made to be this circle of people. We are made to interlace. We used to live in big communities and tribes. Now we're being in this nucleic families on our own, which is really hard. So ask for help.
Asking for help is so key, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do too much sometimes. So really appreciate your willingness to ask for it when you need it. The next question is from Nico. He said, what role does mindfulness play in your creative process?
Does what? Sorry, mindfulness?
Mindfulness play in your creative process.
Right now, it has become more necessary than ever, because Another way to find balance is to have clear objectives. When you know exactly where you want to develop in all the different areas of your life. And right now I'm following like this particular method that has been really interesting. It's called the DeMartini method. You can find it online. It's from this guy that was part of The Secret, the movie, and all these things, which is just knowing the 7 main areas of your life and knowing what you want to achieve in all of them. Because if you don't know where you're going, you will not find balance and you will not get into your purpose. So set your objectives very well and every day pass through your list and make sure that you did at least one thing that gets you closer to your objective in these 7 areas, which are very well explained.
Well, definitely will be looking that up. Next question that we have is, which textiles are most meaningful for you and what would you recommend?
What I will absolutely recommend you is to get lost in one of the Mexican markets. I love huipiles. I love huipiles, especially from the region of Oaxaca and the region of Chiapas. Because when you see these huipiles, which are the indigenous traditional clothing that my people used to use when before the conquest and that continue to use, you're going to find like this, even like this geometry that is very particular. And one of the things that really stands out, they never represent circles because the circles were reserved only for the sun and the moon, which were the deities, so they carry so much history. And remember that everything that you wear carries the energy of the person that made it. So carrying these hands that live in communities that still understand this power and this process of oneness is very special. So there are no brands per se that I would recommend. I would just say wherever you travel to, go back to the original textiles, to the original clothing. Right. There's magic.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oaxaca is actually on my travel list for this year. So I'll definitely be doing some research before I go.
Oaxaca is the best.
It's so beautiful. I can't wait. Danielle, you had mentioned brands and you don't have any brands necessarily to recommend. But are there any brands that you work with or any companies that you work with or have worked with whose values align with yours?
I love this brand called Mi Golondrina. It's based actually here in Dallas, and they work with a very special community of people in Mexico, and they do the right practices, because you know that's always a relationship that can be complicated or become abusive, but they found a way to find a really good balance between the commercial world and helping them out. And I also love Carolina K. Carolina K, she's actually from Argentina. She's a good friend of mine, and she works with artisans both in Chiapas and in Mexico. Beautiful textiles. I wear a lot of her clothes. But again, like also get lost in the markets to see like the original way that they develop them. But those two are very good recommendations. Yes.
Okay. All right. Appreciate the recommendations. Looking back to the chat, again, if anyone else has any more questions or comments, please feel free to drop them, but some really amazing questions and comments coming through. Here's a question from Mary. I have long gray hair, something that is not well accepted yet in our Western society. What do you think of keeping gray hair as a bold statement and act of activism to go beyond age discrimination?
I love that you're doing that, and I'm going for the same. I do not color my hair, and I'm already starting to get my grays, and I want to look exactly like you look right now, and to pull it with all the pride and the gratefulness for what comes out of a life well lived and learned. I think that you're doing the right statement, and do not go for any judgment, or because I truly think that we need to start understanding and going back to who we are. Same goes for Botox and for all of those things. So many people think that it's a necessity. I have 25-year-old friends that are already doing it. I'm admitting my wrinkles, and they costed a lot of work. So I think that I absolutely revere what you're doing. Good for you.
Likewise. One other thing I'd like to ask you about, Danielle, is your podcast. You have a strong Instagram, you have a strong website, beautiful website, by the way. You also have a podcast. And I think that many listeners probably have ambitions to start a podcast one day. So how did you get started with your podcast, and what tips would you give to listeners who hope to start a successful one?
Well, the situation with podcasts is, the problem is that it's a big time investment, and you do need to be very rational about planning your conversations and everything. That's one of the areas where I need to grow myself. But what I can tell you is there are many platforms. Whenever you record a podcast, also create video content so that you can all, you know, there are people that are more visual than others, so always create the video content as well. And just find nice people to work with. Like one of my most successful conversations is with Paola Klug, who is an author. She's a poet from Mexico, and she speaks about like magic, like indigenous magic through hair. So just find people that have your vibe, because it becomes a beautiful circle of energy. It's all about growing and learning from each other. Don't do it only about yourself. Share conversation.
Those are some great tips. Thank you. Looking back at the chat, we have another question, this time from Emily. I've spent this entire quarantine teaching myself to braid. What do you think is the most powerful type of braid? For example, traditional, 3-piece, French, Dutch, waterfall. What do you think? Well, in my opinion, at least for myself, it's this one, just because of the chakra connection to the center of it all. Braids per se are extremely powerful. When your mind is like, when you're not being able to focus, just braid your hair. I cannot work with my hair down. It literally, like if I'm trying to write or achieve something, even if it's like the simplest of braids, just braid your hair, because again, like it brings everything into one. It creates this concept of oneness. My power braid is this one, but it's all about like whenever you do, just make sure that you go through this ritual of letting go from the hair and then braiding what you need. If you do that, any braid will bring about what is the most powerful and purposeful part of you. All goes back to what you're talking about in regarding intention. And your exactly. If you, I always start touching my third eye. You know, like this is where I put forward like the beginning of every braid, because it brings to your attention that it's in your mind. Everything that you're creating around you, it's just coming out of your mind. Love that. And you clearly are a very multidisciplinary artist. I also see that you create clay pieces. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Yes, I've been experimenting with clay. One of the theories, you know, there's this magical book called the Popol Vuh, which is all about like when Mexico was formed, like that's how the way that they understand creation. And they talk about when the gods put together like different materials to create men. And one of those materials was clay. I always found that metaphor to be quite beautiful. And when you're working with clay, you're working with the earth, you're working with like what sustains us. There is such a magical connection. I've been doing figurative sculpture, and again, like we have so much energy in our hands, and when you're transmitting that to a piece and letting it out, and you actually find that you can form something out of it, God, it's a spiritual connection. It goes beyond anything I've ever done with textiles or like sculpture. Just try yourself, see the power that you have in your hands. They say that that there's more connection with things by touching them with your hands than even like kissing or whatever. Use that power. Okay, that sounds really amazing. And one thing I like to go back to, you mentioned that you worked at agencies, you worked in fashion, and then you kind of branched off and started doing your own thing. So what advice would you give to creatives out there who are stuck in one industry or in one world and are looking to break into something they're more passionate about? To make sure that they have their objectives set. Like right now, I was still doing some consulting with another company that I've been building experiences for the last 3 years. And I decided that this year I need to finish that part of me, because I think that the problem for most creatives is if you're working in an industry that brings you back to this business mindset, it's really hard, because it's very hard to write poetry when you're also living in the real world, and people, have their own interests, and like it's hard. So for me, I was finding a place when I was not able to create, because you kind of see like the worst of people sometimes. It's not personal, but it's business. And then so I couldn't, and I chose to finish in February and to really dedicate to my creative side.
but with structure. You cannot just say, oh, I'm going to create, I'm doing a residency and I'm finding different steps that will take me to my main objective.
Right. Really being clear on those goals so that you can ultimately take those steps to achieve them.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So I'm going to read one last question. What recommendations do you have, Danielle, for people for finding and supporting different, more meaningful clothiers?
Well, I think that in the end, what moves you, like look deep into what moves you, because I've always seen, like humanity, like this big puzzle, and that we are all a piece of this. We're all a fragment of this, and we're all bringing like a different energy and a different stance. So what is it that moves you the most? Is it the arts? Is it people? Is it animals? Is it, where do you feel like shivers whenever you see suffering? Go there and find a way to support that area. And you're going to find, like it always happens, that you're actually the one being supported by the cause you're helping. So, but always go back inside of you, because we've learned not to listen to those messages. But God, do we know? We really know. You know right now exactly where you have to focus yourself in. Like it's the first thing that's going to come to your mind as I'm saying these things. Just go and make sure that you are always in touch with that area of your life or of development.
You definitely inspired me to trust my instinct more, trust my gut, and trust those tingles that I receive, because it usually is for the right reason. So with that, Danielle, thank you so much for the conversation today. I've been braiding my hair for my whole life, but you've really inspired me to really think a bit more about how I can do so with intention. So thank you so much. And before we sign off today, is there anything that any message that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Thank you so much, Catherine. And I think that the most important message for me is based in one of the questions that I often get. Some people are intimidated by braiding because they think that it belongs to one culture or the other. For me, my stance, and the main reason why I keep braiding myself so boldly, and why I've made it sort of the center of my practice, is to understand that we're all braided together. We started with braiding. Braiding was the way in which kids would cling into our hairs, and men, women. So don't feel intimidated by it. Just understand the magic that it carries and all the process that it has come from. Like we all come from Africa. We all started there, and then we started dissipating. But that was one of the practices that remained. So it's always a matter of respect, and do it from the heart. I don't think that it should be taken, like whatever. But let's understand that we are one, and that we are in this world together. And the only way to move forward is if we come together instead of tearing the social fabric apart, and live with intention.
Beautifully said. And thank you so much for the thoughtful reminders, Danielle. That brings us to the end of our conversation today. Muchísimas gracias. And enjoy the rest of your day. You're a beautiful human, and you've left us all with so much inspiration. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone that took the time to spend this little piece of your days with us. And thank you to Yellow Brick as well for bringing us together.
Yes, thank you, Yellow Brick. All right, take care, Danielle. Ciao.
Have a good day. Bye.